These bodies, these are marvelous things and so strong and so adaptable, yet so fragile when something goes wrong. I've been told there's probably 100, 120 people here tonight.
There's 200. No, like 200.
There's a lot of people here tonight. Well, statistically, there's about 1 in 50 of you here that has an undiagnosed brain aneurysm. Sorry. This is a bulge in the blood vessel of the walls of the brain, and it weakens and thins. It's difficult to detect, even if you're looking for it. Risky to fix if you find it, but don't worry. You're in luck. Chances are you're probably going to go through the rest of your happy little lives not being any the wiser. But for about 1 in 15,000, that goes a little differently. And that aneurysm ruptures into what's commonly known as a cerebral hemorrhage. There's 4 different types of cerebral hemorrhage. And not to belittle the other 3, but the badass by far, and the one that's most challenging to doctors and patients, is called an aneurysmal subarachnoid hemorrhage. And it gets its name from the subarachnoid space, and that's the space that's in between your brain and your skull. It's filled with spongy tissue, cerebrospinal fluid. It acts as a shock absorber for our brains and our spinal cord. It's also where the circle of Willis is, which is a group of blood vessels that wrap around our brain. Very, very complicated part of the body. And when you have a subarachnoid hemorrhage, you end up with blood on the wrong side of that blood-brain barrier. Our iron-rich blood is toxic to the surface of our brains. This got dark quick, didn't it? Bear with me. If you were to take 10 people that had a subarachnoid hemorrhage, unfortunately, stats aren't that rosy. 1 or 2 of the 10 will drop dead on the spot or not make it to hospital. As with the mother of a friend of mine who was out in the middle of English Bay on a booze cruise on her 50th birthday, dropped in the middle of the dance floor, never recovered. Tragic. I've thought about that often, though. It's not a bad way to go, but surrounded by friends, family. Anyways. 2 or 3 of those 10 won't make it the first 2 weeks because of rebleeding in the site of the aneurysm, or a host of other complications. Something called vasospasms is another one, where the blood vessels of the brain constrict, essentially depriving your brain of oxygen, and you die of a stroke. So right out of the gates, this has got about a 30 to 50% mortality rate. Those that survive face a rather horrifying spectrum of disabilities. Cognitive disabilities, physical disabilities, personality changes, debilitating headaches. A couple of the stories that I came across while I was researching this. A gentleman who, very successful businessman, had a subarachnoid hemorrhage. Cognitively is all there, fine, survived it. But he's in a wheelchair and he can't speak. Another woman who was 4 months in ICU, and a good chunk of that was on life support. She's had 2.5 years of ongoing physical therapy. She's getting better, though. She can now walk with the aid of crutches, and she's beginning to speak without a slur. Other stories that I heard of, massive personality changes or people who are stricken with just debilitating headaches constantly. 4 of the 10, 40% of these people won't get over their disabilities. They'll have them permanently for life. And then through some random set of circumstances, time to hospital, general health overall, where the bleed is in the brain, and a huge dose of luck. 1 of those 10, some stats say less than 1 of the 10, walk away from this like it was nothing more than a broken bone. Like me. December 21st, 2016, a little over a year ago, I had an aneurysmal subarachnoid hemorrhage. I was spending the evening with my girlfriend. She was getting ready to go to Arizona to spend Christmas with her mother. And we were just having a quiet night, getting ready for bed. And if there's a telltale sign for a heart attack, you know, somebody clutching their chest, you know, going, I got pain in my heart. The telltale sign for a subarachnoid hemorrhage is what's called the thunderclap headache. A headache that comes on that's so large, so pervasive, so debilitating, it's hard to remember what it was like when it wasn't there. For about 15 seconds, I felt like my head was actually literally filled with bees. I felt a buzzing in my head. I had a nice little nap. Unbeknownst to me, I'd gone into seizure and was unconscious for about 5 to 6 minutes. And when I came to, I was a little disoriented. My girlfriend was on the phone. I'm like, who are you talking to? I thought she was talking to her mother for some reason. Fortunately, she was talking to 911. And she made all the right moves. Natasha made all the right moves. And very quickly, I was in an ambulance to one of the finest emergency rooms in Canada, the Royal Jubilee. I remember this just sort of as kind of like a series of vignettes, kind of photographs almost. I remember being in an ambulance. I remember being in the emergency room. I remember talking to a doctor who I thought had nice blonde hair for some reason. I remember being in a CT scanner in another ambulance over to Vic General, to one of the finest neurology wards in Canada. I was actually surprisingly calm through all of this. I found out later on that one of the drugs that I'd been given that was keeping me alive, essentially, keeping my blood pressure low, keeping me calm, was fentanyl. So. I had a long conversation with the neurosurgeon about what had happened, what his suggested course of action was, and what the possible outcomes were. So December 23rd, 2016, early morning, went into surgery for a craniotomy. I was in surgery for about 6 hours. And I came out of it with 2 titanium clips on the blood vessels in my brain where the site of the aneurysm was. 4 stainless steel screws in my skull. A bitchin' scar that's fading all too fast. And a picture of my brain. So just before going in, I said to the anesthesiologist, I'm like, hey, can you get a picture of my brain? It's a very sort of a dour, serious professional, and he was kind of like, I'll see what I can do while I'm trying to save your life, a-hole. But I got a picture of my brain. Now, I was really kind of hoping for sort of the team selfie around the operating table. But what I ended up with was a photo that looks remarkably like a bowl of macaroni and ketchup. But I didn't so much as awake in ICU as had just sort of a gradual increasing of consciousness over 24 hours. And as I was kind of coming to, I was sort of doing a little bit of a self-assessment. I could remember my nieces and nephews' names. I could remember my passwords. You know, I could pretend to feed myself. Okay, I can feed myself. It seemed to be I was in control of my faculties and functions. I was in a lot of pain. It was very uncomfortable. Number one, for the blood that was coursing around in my body where it shouldn't be. And number two, something that can happen during trauma to the brain is called cerebral salt wasting, where your body kicks a hormone into overdrive and you start to shed salt faster than you can replace it. So I was on a strict regime of no water, just little hospital juices, and salt tablets like Skittles. The nurses would come in and they had this little routine hourly, squeeze my fingers, paddle your feet on my hands. Do you know your name? Do you know where you are? Do you know what date it is? Here, have a handful of salt tablets and a couple other medications. The only thing that, I started cramping badly because of just this dehydration. So the only thing that I felt, really helped was getting up and moving. So very quickly, I was probably after about day 2, day 3, did a lap around the nurse's station, pushing my little Christmas tree of medical monitors, flapping in the back, I'm sure. The next day it was two laps. The nurses would say to me, "Wow, you're doing so well." I kind of didn't sort of take it too much. I didn't take it too seriously because, like, what the hell else does an ICU nurse say to you? But I guess I really sort of started to understand that something profound had happened when I was being discharged, and the discharging nurse said to me, "You have no idea how lucky you are." Okay, why? She's like, "There's only 1 or 2 people a year that are discharged directly from ICU, healthy enough to go home." I had another conversation with the doctor, and basically all I had was when I went home, all I had was a couple of weeks of painkillers, some other medications, nothing too serious, and a follow-up appointment at 3 months. And a lot of time on my hands to start researching what this was that had happened. Started educating myself a lot more about it. I also began to sort of process almost what felt like a survivor's guilt. Why had I dodged this bullet? Why was I so lucky? During that time, I've been asked numerous times by people, has this changed your view on life? Has this altered how you see the world? I have to say, for the most part, no. My life is still on the same trajectory that it was before. I had a happy life before. I was anxious to get back to it. I haven't sold all my possessions to take up big wave surfing. And yet, yes, it has changed my life in a more quietly, profound way. I really started to take that survivor's guilt and luck and really having a good look at it and examining it and trying to understand what did it mean to be lucky. That coalesced into sort of looking at gratitude, thankfulness, and what I had in my life to be thankful for. I'm a very lucky man. I live in a time and a place that affords me the greatest the world has to offer, with the fewest compromises. I've got access to healthy air, water, clean local food. I live in a safe, uncorrupt place. This is not downtown Mogadishu. I also had a look into our medical system that I'd only ever, guessed at from watching TV shows. And despite its administrative faults, it is filled with talented, caring people, world-class professionals who will catch you when you fall. Thank you. I have amazing gratitude for our medical people. To crib a line from Eddie Vedder, I'm a lucky man to count on both hands the ones I love. And I'm a very fortunate man to have that love returned by many. and Natasha, who through some very dark hours of her own did things like made the hard calls to my family, who she'd never met, stick-handled my work, my obligations, stayed in constant contact with my friends. My social media had never been managed so well. And every bit of this is a shared experience with her. She saved my life. She was there when I woke up. And for her, I reserve the purest form of gratitude. Preparing for this talk it's been cathartic. It's been very good for me. And as I stand here tonight, I'm a healthy man, possibly even healthier than I was before. No cognitive disability that wasn't already there. My people have told me that I'm all here, present and accounted for. And I don't think of myself as a medical marvel or a miracle of some sort or other. But I do know in my bones that I'm a very lucky man. To have been chosen at random to play the body's version of Russian roulette, and I won. Thank you.